about medieval times. Introduction. Hello, welcome to the medieval times. As long as you're with me, I will be telling you about the art, shelter, defense, nutrition, clothing, religion, transportation, and communication of the medieval times. Shelter. In the Middle Ages, lords, rich landowners, built castles for protection as bases for their soldiers. Castles are home to the royals, kings, queens, princesses, and princes. In 1295, 30 blacksmiths, 400 masons, and 2,000 laborers, as well as stonebreakers and well diggers, were hired to build Beaumaris Castle in North Wales. About 1,000 years ago, castles were built out of wood, which was quickly replaced by stone, so the enemies couldn't burn down the castle. To help build a castle, a carpenter might use an axe, a saw, a handsaw, and an awl. A mason might use a mason's axe, a chisel, and a mallet. The earliest castles were built in the 9th and 10th centuries. The age of castles was almost 1,000 years ago and lasted for 500 years. In the Middle Ages, there were more than 15,000 castles built all over Europe and close to the Near East. Many castles were built along the Loire River in France. In the 13th century, castles were made with rings of stone walls, one in front of the other. They were called concentric castles. In this age, spiral staircases were common in castles. The Walt Disney logo was inspired by Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany. In the 9th century, a scene painter designed it to look medieval. Communication in the Middle Ages. Education. Boys that were not too poor, not too rich, were allowed to attend grammar schools. Women had a lot of disadvantages in the Middle Ages, such as they were not allowed to go to school, they were not even allowed to learn. They had to teach themselves a lot. Look how I move. Smarter boys could attend universities to learn more about grammar, logic, music, geometry, and more. Students were whacked with wooden rods if they got an answer wrong in school.
Are you going to demonstrate that?
No. Entertainment. Practice battles were one popular form of entertainment. All it is two knights on horses trying to knock each other off their horses with jousts. Groups of traveling musicians called jongleurs went to castles to entertain kings and queens with lovely music. Lords and ladies also enjoyed playing music, singing, and making up poetry. Nobles also enjoyed listening to storytellers tell stories of romance and chivalry. Chivalry is when polite knights are courteous, generous, respectful to women, and more. For example, if a lady was walking by and was about to step in mud, the knight would take off his cloak and cover the mud with it so the lady wouldn't step in the mud. Embroidering and playing chess were other hobbies, aka entertainment. Lords had close relationships to their falcons. Yes, you're probably wondering, they had pet falcons? Indeed, lords did have pet falcons. The falcons were kept in special buildings called mews. They were indeed like pets. Sadly, to this day, we can't get pet falcons. Language. In medieval England, they spoke a version of Old English called Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon used a few letters in our alphabet today. Sadly, I don't know what letters they are. Here are some letters in Anglo-Saxon. Ew. Religion. The Christian church was important to the people of the Middle Ages. The church was an important thing people had in common. The Europeans developed a style of art called Gothic art in architecture. Christians built stately cathedrals of stone and tall towers with stained glass windows. Notre Dame in Paris, France, is an example of a Gothic cathedral. Raise your hand if you've been there. During the Middle Ages, there was a big fight called the Crusades. Christians and Muslims fought for their holy land. Clothing. Fashion was very important in the Middle Ages. Rich people wore gold chains, jewels, and had brightly colored clothing. Different colors of clothes meant different meanings. Blue meant you were in love, yellow meant anger, and gray meant sadness. Women often hid their hair with headdresses. A headdress is a piece of fabric with a wire to keep it in shape. Some headdresses were shaped like animal horns and butterfly wings, and some were 3 feet tall. Some men's shoes were so pointed that they needed string to tie back the shoe point, and some had wooden platforms to walk through mud. There were no stores to buy clothes in the Middle Ages, so the rich hired tailors to make the latest fashion. The poor could not afford fancy clothes like the rich, so they wore simple clothing such as tunics, cloaks, hats, hoods, and more. In fact, with frequent repairs, these clothes could last for years. Armor. It could take up to an hour for a knight to get dressed and ready for battle. Chainmail. Chainmail was used a lot for protection. Chainmail is a thick iron wire that is bent around a rod and chopped into rings. The ends got hammered and pierced with tiny holes so they could get linked together. Chainmail was used in addition to a suit of armor. Parts of a suit of armor. Helmet protects the head. Breastplate protects the chest. Gauntlet protects the hand and wrist, kind of like a metal glove. Tassette protects the hips and the opposite of a bottom for a man. You get it. Also where chainmail is. Sabaton protects the foot. Greave protects the calf/shin. Cuirass protects the thigh. Vambrace protects the forearm. Pauldron protects the shoulder. Bevar protects the chin. And Bessigue protects the breast. Defense. Some weapons they used in the Middle Ages are swords, daggers, longbows, a longbow with arrows, axes, crossbow, maces, and shields. But their main weapon was a sword. Speaking of weapons, did you know that a skilled longbowman could hit a target up to 300 feet away and shoot up to 12 arrows a minute? And could propel its arrows from 1,000 feet? Every medieval soldier would carry a dagger at his waist, ready to use if needed. Some crossbows were so powerful that a windlass was needed. A windlass is a chain/gear that moves like a bicycle gear when you turn the handle/crank. To draw back thick cord attached to the bow arm. Knights were the most important fighting men. Most castles had a moat. A moat is a body of water around something. Some castles were built next to a river or a seashore for protection. If it didn't have a moat, sorry, my nose itchy. How a moat protects a castle. A moat is helpful because if there was a fight going on, the enemies would probably want to get in the castle. But if there was a giant body of water around it, it would be way harder to get in. Art. In the Middle Ages, groups of craftsmen called guilds provided a way for trade skills to be learned and passed down generation after generation. Women in this age did learn skilled crafts, but weren't allowed to join guilds or start one. Stained glass was another important thing in the Middle Ages. Stained glass windows are pieces of colored glass put together to make a picture. Stained glass was sometimes just colored glass in geometric shape. Some were designed from a scene from the Bible. The stained glass windows provided light for the inside of the church in a way that also reinforced the idea that the church worships the Christian God. Nutrition. For nobles in the Middle Ages, there was always beef, mutton, pork, and venison at the dinner table. The cook also made birds such as swans, ducks, herons, blackbirds, and pigeons. They used knives and spoons, and their cups were made out of horns from an animal. All medieval kitchens had at least one big cauldron to cook with. Of course, they didn't have electrical stoves or electric ovens. So the cook wrapped up food such as eggs, bacon, vegetables, and puddings in cloth bags and put them in a big pot of boiling water. A person called a turnspit had the hottest job. He/she had to turn a big wooden or metal pool with meat on it. Fridges weren't a thing back then, so salt was used to keep food from spoiling. It was a very important and expensive thing. They called it white gold. It was so important because it gave food an improved and unique taste. Transportation. The people of the Middle Ages rode horses and wagons. Roads. In the Middle Ages, they had dirt roads. They were rocky and uneven, but the wagons with big, thin wooden wheels were so thin and flimsy that they couldn't handle riding on rocks one after the other. They also got muddy in bad weather because the roads weren't paved, not concrete like our roads today. You can tell they didn't put a lot of effort into making roads back then. Here's a picture of the wagon with the big wooden wheel. Conclusion. I chose the Middle Ages for my great project because I was always interested in royalty and their beautiful clothing and the jewels on gold chains that they wore and the beautiful shiny weapons. And of course, I always loved going to medieval times. I hope you enjoyed my report on the Middle Ages. The end.
Nice job, Julia.